The bitter wind howled across the snow-laden plains of Wyoming territory as Abigail Reed stumbled forward, her breath coming in ragged clouds before her face. The year was 1876, and she had been running for what felt like an eternity, the frozen landscape stretching endlessly before her. Her once fine blue dress was torn at the hem, her boots soaked through with snow, and her fingers numb inside threadbare gloves. "Keep moving," she whispered to herself, the words immediately snatched away by the howling wind. "Just keep moving." The blizzard had descended without warning, transforming the already treacherous journey into a fight for survival. Abigail had fled Cheyenne 3 days ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small bundle of possessions. Now, as darkness fell and the temperature plummeted, she feared she had made a terrible mistake. The snow was falling so heavily that Abigail could barely see 10 feet ahead. Her legs ached with each step, and the cold had settled deep into her bones. Just as she felt her strength failing, she spotted a faint glow in the distance, a pinprick of light in the vast whiteness. Hope surged within her chest, giving her renewed energy to push forward. But the snow was deep, and her exhaustion profound. She stumbled, fell to her knees, and found she lacked the strength to stand again. "Please," she whispered, though there was no one to hear her plea. "Please help me." As if in answer, she heard the muffled sound of hoofbeats approaching through the snow. A dark silhouette emerged from the swirling white, a man on horseback, his broad shoulders dusted with snow and his face partially obscured by a worn leather hat. The rider pulled his horse to a stop beside her. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were kind as they regarded her with concern. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and steady, "what in heaven's name are you doing out here alone in this storm?" Abigail tried to speak, but her lips were too numb, her throat too dry. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots crunching in the snow as he approached her. He knelt down, removing his gloves to touch her face gently, assessing her condition. "You're half frozen," he said, his brow furrowed with worry. "Come on now, I can't leave you out here." With gentle strength, he lifted her to her feet, supporting her weight when her legs threatened to give way. "I'm Adam," he said simply. "Adam Evans. I've got a place not far from here." He helped her toward his horse, a sturdy palomino that stood patiently in the snow. "You'll make it home with me," he said, the certainty in his voice giving Abigail her first moment of peace in days. "I promise you that." With skilled hands, he lifted her onto his horse before mounting behind her. His strong arms reached around to take the reins, creating a protective circle around her shivering form. The warmth of his body against her back was the first real comfort she had felt since fleeing. "Hold on now," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear. The horse moved forward through the deepening snow, picking its way carefully across the white landscape. Abigail leaned back against the stranger's chest, too exhausted and cold to worry about propriety. As they rode, the light she had seen grew larger and more defined, a small cabin nestled against a stand of pine trees, smoke curling from its chimney. It looked like salvation. "That's it," Adam said. "My home. Not much to look at, but it's warm and dry." When they reached the cabin, Adam dismounted first, then carefully helped Abigail down. Her legs buckled beneath her, but he caught her swiftly, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. "Sorry, madam," he said, carrying her toward the door. "But seems to me you're not quite up to walking just yet." The door swung open with a nudge from his boot, revealing a simple but tidy interior. A fire burned in the hearth, casting golden light across the wooden floors and walls. A small table with 2 chairs sat near the hearth, and a bed was positioned against the far wall. Adam set her gently in a chair by the fire. "I need to see to my horse," he explained. "Then I'll be back to help you get warmed up. Don't you worry about a thing." Abigail nodded mutely, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to believe she might survive. True to his word, Adam returned quickly, stamping snow from his boots before closing the door firmly against the storm. He hung his hat and coat on pegs by the door and moved to her side. "Can you tell me your name, madam?" he asked, crouching beside her chair. "Abigail," she managed to say through chattering teeth. "Abigail Reed." "Miss Reed," he acknowledged with a nod. "Let's get you warmed up properly. Those wet clothes need to come off." Seeing the alarm in her eyes, he quickly added, "I've got some spare clothes you can wear. They'll be too big, but they're dry and warm. I'll step outside while you change." He retrieved a flannel shirt and a pair of wool trousers from a trunk, along with a pair of thick socks. He placed them in her lap, then pointed to a screen in the corner of the room. "You can change behind there if you'd prefer," he said. "I'll go check on the horse again, give you some privacy." After he had gone outside, Abigail struggled to her feet and made her way behind the screen. Her fingers were still stiff with cold, making the buttons of her dress difficult to manage, but eventually she managed to exchange her sodden clothing for Adam's dry garments. The shirt hung nearly to her knees, and she had to roll the trousers up several times, but the blessed warmth of the dry fabric against her skin brought tears to her eyes. When Adam returned, he found her seated by the fire again, her damp hair hanging loose around her shoulders. "Better?" he asked, moving to hang her wet clothes on a line near the hearth. "Yes," she replied, her voice stronger now. "Thank you, Mr. Evans. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." His expression darkened momentarily. "Best not to think on that," he said. "You're safe now, and that's what matters." He moved to a pot that hung near the fire. "I've got some stew. It's not fancy, but it's hot." As Adam ladled the hearty stew into a bowl for her, Abigail took the opportunity to observe her rescuer more closely. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-browned skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and clear blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Here you go," he said, handing her the bowl and a spoon. "Eat slowly now. Your body's been through an ordeal." The stew was simple but delicious chunks of venison with potatoes, carrots, and onions. Abigail hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first spoonful passed her lips, and she had to force herself to heed Adam's advice to eat slowly. Adam served himself a bowl and sat in the chair opposite her. For a while, they ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howling of the wind outside. "If you don't mind me asking," Adam finally said, "what brought you out into a blizzard like this, Miss Reed? It's not the sort of weather folks usually choose for traveling." Abigail set her spoon down, her appetite suddenly diminished. "I'm running away," she admitted softly, "from a man in Cheyenne, a man who wanted to marry me whether I consented or not." Adam's expression hardened. "I see," he said simply, though the tightness in his jaw spoke volumes. "And where were you headed?" "St. Joe," she replied. "I have an aunt there. I thought I could make it before the snow came." Adam nodded thoughtfully. "St. Joe's a good 5 days' ride from here in good weather," he said. "In this storm it might as well be on the moon." He glanced toward the window, where snow was piling up against the glass. "You'll have to stay here until the weather breaks, I'm afraid." Abigail's hands twisted in her lap. "I don't wish to impose. It's no imposition," Adam interrupted gently. "I couldn't in good conscience send you back out there, and I suspect you wouldn't get far even if I did." The realization that she would be staying in this small cabin with a man she had just met should have alarmed her, But something about Adam's steady presence and kind eyes made her feel safe rather than threatened. "Thank you," she said simply. "You take the bed," Adam said, rising to clear their empty bowls. "I'll sleep by the fire." Despite her protests, Adam insisted, and soon Abigail found herself lying in his bed, wrapped in warm blankets that smelled of pine and wood smoke. From her position, she could see Adam making up a bedroll near the hearth, his movements efficient and practiced. "Good night, Miss Reed," he said as he settled down. "Rest easy now." "Good night, Mr. Evans," she replied, feeling exhaustion overtake her. "And thank you again for saving my life." The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Adam's silhouette against the firelight, a steadfast guardian against the storm that raged outside. Abigail awoke to the smell of coffee and the sound of a knife against a cutting board. Morning light filtered through the cabin's windows, revealing that the storm had passed during the night. The world outside was transformed into a pristine white landscape, beautiful but treacherous. Adam stood at a small counter, slicing bread. He turned when he heard her stir. "Good morning," he greeted her. "How are you feeling?" Abigail sat up, taking stock of her body. Her muscles ached from her journey, but the bone-deep cold was gone. "Better," she answered truthfully. "Much better." "Good to hear," Adam said with a smile that transformed his serious face. "I've made coffee and there's bread and some preserves for breakfast. Nothing fancy, I'm afraid." "It sounds wonderful," Abigail said, rising from the bed. She smoothed down the oversized shirt she wore, suddenly conscious of her appearance. "Do you think, might my clothes be dry now?" "Should be." Adam nodded toward the hearth where her dress and underthings hung. "I'll step outside while you get dressed." True to his word, Adam gave her privacy to change. When she had donned her own clothing once more, she called out to let him know it was safe to return. They ate breakfast together at the small table, and Abigail found herself studying Adam when he wasn't looking. There was a quiet strength about him, a self-sufficiency that spoke of years spent relying on no one but himself. "Have you lived here long, Mr. Evans?" she asked, curious about the man who had saved her life. "Going on 5 years now," he replied. "Came west after the war, wanted some peace and quiet, I suppose." "The war?" she asked, noting the shadow that crossed his face. "I fought for the Union," he said simply. "Saw things I'd rather forget." He took a sip of his coffee, then changed the subject. "What about you, Miss Reed? What's your story, besides fleeing from unwanted suitors in blizzards?" Despite the gravity of her situation, Abigail found herself smiling at his gentle teasing. "I was a school teacher in Cheyenne," she told him. "I came west 2 years ago after my parents died. I had hoped to make a new start." "And this man who was pursuing you?" Adam asked, his voice carefully neutral. Abigail's smile faded. "Harold Blackstone. He owns half the businesses in Cheyenne, including the boarding house where I was staying. He made it clear that he expected me to accept his proposal, and when I refused, he threatened to have me dismissed from my position." She swallowed hard. "When I still refused, his threats became more direct." Adam's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "I see," he said, his voice low with anger though not directed at her. "And no one in town would stand against him." Abigail shook her head. "He's a powerful man, and I'm just a school teacher with no family nearby." "So you ran," Adam said, not as an accusation but as a statement of fact. "Yes," she admitted. "I took what I could carry and left in the night. I thought I could make it to St. Joe before anyone realized I was gone. I didn't count on the storm." Adam was silent for a moment, considering. "Well," he finally said, "you're welcome to stay here until it's safe for you to continue your journey. The snow's too deep for travel right now anyway." "Are you sure?" Abigail asked, hesitant to impose further on his generosity. "I'm sure," Adam confirmed with a nod. "It's no hardship having you here, Miss Reed." And so began Abigail's unexpected stay at Adam Evans' cabin. The first day passed quietly, with Adam showing her around his small property. Besides the cabin, there was a sturdy barn where he kept his horse and a milk cow, a smokehouse, and a small garden plot now buried under snow. "I'm mostly self-sufficient," he explained as they walked through the knee-deep snow. "I hunt and fish, grow what vegetables I can. Trade for flour and sugar and such when I need to. It's a good life," Abigail observed, noting the pride with which he showed her his homestead. "It is," Adam agreed. "Peaceful, sometimes a bit lonely," he admitted with a slight smile, "but peaceful." As the days passed, they fell into an easy routine. Adam would rise early to tend to the animals and chop wood, while Abigail took over much of the cooking and indoor chores. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking or reading from the small collection of books Adam kept. Abigail learned that Adam had been a captain in the Union Army, that he had a younger sister in Boston whom he wrote to regularly, and that he had a remarkable talent for carving wood. Small figurines of animals and birds decorated the cabin's shelves, evidence of long winter evenings spent by the fire. For his part, Adam discovered that Abigail was well-educated and quick-witted, with a dry humor that surprised and delighted him. She could recite poetry from memory, knew how to mend almost anything, and harbored a secret passion for adventure stories that made her eyes light up when she spoke of them. On the fourth day of her stay, as they were washing dishes together after the midday meal, their hands brushed in the wash basin. Abigail felt a jolt of awareness at the contact, and when she looked up, she found Adam watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I apologize," he said quickly, withdrawing his hand. "I didn't mean to, it's all right," she interrupted, surprised by her disappointment when he pulled away. That evening, as they sat by the fire, a comfortable silence between them, Abigail found herself studying Adam's profile, admiring the strong line of his jaw and the gentle curve of his lips. As if sensing her gaze, he turned to look at her, and for a long moment they simply regarded one another in the firelight. "Abigail," he said softly, the first time he had used her given name. A sudden pounding at the door startled them both. Adam rose quickly, his hand going instinctively to the rifle that hung above the mantel. "Stay back," he instructed Abigail in a low voice. The pounding came again, followed by a man's voice calling out, "Hello, the cabin. Anyone home?" Adam moved to the door, rifle in hand, and called out, "Who's there?" "Name's Jenkins, from over Carson Ridge Way," came the reply. "Got caught in the pass heading to St. Joe. Saw your smoke." With a glance at Abigail, who had retreated to stand near the hearth, Adam cautiously opened the door. A middle-aged man stood on the threshold, snow crusting his beard and eyebrows. Behind him, a younger man, perhaps his son, stood shivering beside a pair of exhausted-looking horses. "Sorry to trouble you, mister," Jenkins said, his teeth chattering, "but we're half frozen out here. Storm caught us by surprise." Adam lowered his rifle. "Come in," he said, stepping back. "Bring your horses around to the barn, there's room there." As the travelers entered, stamping snow from their boots, their eyes fell on Abigail standing by the fire. The elder Jenkins raised his eyebrows in surprise, but said nothing. The younger man, however, stared openly until his father elbowed him in the ribs. "This is Miss Reed," Adam said by way of introduction. "She was also caught in the storm a few days back. Miss Reed, this is Mr. Jenkins and—" "My son, Thomas," Jenkins supplied. "We're much obliged for the shelter, madam." Abigail nodded politely, though she felt a strange unease at the way the younger Jenkins was looking at her as if he were trying to place her face. Adam helped the men settle their horses in the barn, while Abigail put on coffee and heated some of the stew left over from their midday meal. When the men returned, red-cheeked from the cold, they accepted the hot food and coffee with gratitude. As they ate, Jenkins explained that they were heading to St. Joe on business. "We're horse traders," he said between mouthfuls of stew. "Got a buyer waiting in St. Joe." "You're a long way from the usual trail," Adam observed. Jenkins shrugged. "Thought we'd try the high pass. Save a day or two. Wouldn't have if we'd known the storm was coming." Throughout the meal, Abigail was aware of Thomas Jenkins watching her. Finally, as she refilled their coffee cups, he spoke directly to her. "Begging your pardon, madam, but you look mighty familiar. Have we met before?" Abigail's hand trembled slightly as she set the coffee pot down. "I don't believe so," she said carefully. "Thomas has a good memory for faces," the elder Jenkins said proudly. "Where you from originally, Miss Reed?" "Cheyenne," she answered, seeing no reason to lie about that much. Thomas snapped his fingers. "That's it. I knew I'd seen you somewhere. We were in Cheyenne just last week. Saw a notice posted about a missing schoolteacher. Reward offered for information." Abigail felt the blood drain from her face. Adam, who had been watching the exchange closely, moved to stand beside her. "Miss Reed is traveling to visit family in St. Joe," he said firmly. "She's not missing. She's exactly where she intends to be." The elder Jenkins looked between Adam and Abigail, a calculating expression on his weathered face. "Reward was substantial," he commented. $500, wasn't it, Thomas?" "Yes, sir," Thomas confirmed, his eyes still on Abigail. "Posted by a Mr. Blackstone." Adam's posture stiffened, but his voice remained steady. "Miss Reed is under my protection," he said quietly. "I'd take it kindly if you'd respect that." A tense silence fell over the cabin. Finally, Jenkins Sr. nodded slowly. "None of our business, I suppose," he conceded. "We're just passing through." The atmosphere in the cabin remained strained for the rest of the evening. Adam made up beds for their guests near the fire, while he and Abigail retreated to the far side of the cabin. He had insisted on giving her the bed again, setting up his own bedroll alongside it close enough to protect her if needed, but still maintaining propriety. As they prepared for sleep, Adam whispered to her, "Don't worry, they'll be gone tomorrow and they won't trouble you." "How can you be sure?" Abigail whispered back, her fear evident in her trembling voice. Adam's expression was grim but determined. "Because I won't let them," he promised. "Now try to sleep. I'll keep watch." Despite her anxiety, Abigail eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep, comforted by Adam's protective presence beside her. She awoke before dawn to the sound of hushed voices. Opening her eyes slightly, she saw the two Jenkins men moving quietly about the cabin, gathering their belongings. Adam was already up, standing near the door with his arms crossed over his chest, watching them intently. "Remember what I said," Adam told them in a low voice. "Miss Reed is not to be mentioned to anyone. Not in St. Joe, not in Cheyenne, not anywhere." "And like I told you," the elder Jenkins replied, "we mind our own business. But you might want to consider that reward money, mister. $500 is a lot to pass up." "Not to me, it isn't," Adam said firmly. "Safe travels, gentlemen." After the Jenkins men had departed, Adam turned to find Abigail sitting up in bed watching him. "You heard," he said, moving to sit beside her on the edge of the bed. "Yes," she confirmed. "Adam, he's looking for me. He won't stop." Adam took her hand in his touch gentle but reassuring. "Abigail, I won't let him find you. I promise you that." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight with emotion. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Adam was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "I think I know you better than you realize," he finally said. And I think you might be the person I've been waiting for without even knowing it." The confession hung in the air between them, profound in its simplicity. Abigail felt her heart beating faster as Adam's eyes met hers, the blue depths filled with an emotion she was only beginning to recognize. "I feel it too," she whispered, hardly daring to believe the connection that had formed between them in such a short time. Adam's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch so gentle it made her want to weep. "When I found you in that snow," he said softly, "I told you you'd make it home with me. I didn't know then how true those words would be." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Adam leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tender, a question rather than a demand, and Abigail found herself responding with a certainty that surprised her. Her hands came up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally parted, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want you to go to St. Joe," he admitted. "I want you to stay here with me." The offer took her breath away. "Adam," she began, uncertainty creeping into her voice, "what about Blackstone? He won't just forget about me." Adam's expression hardened with resolve. "Then we'll deal with him," he said firmly. "Together. But I won't let fear of him keep us apart if this is what you want too." Abigail looked around the small cabin that had become a sanctuary to her. It was simple, yes, but in its simplicity, she had found a peace she hadn't known was possible. And in Adam, she had found someone who valued her for herself, who protected her not because she was weak, but because she was precious to him. "Yes," she said, the word both a confession and a promise. "I want to stay." The joy that transformed Adam's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I love you, Abigail Reed," he whispered against her hair. "I think I've loved you since I found you in that snowstorm." "And I love you, Adam Evans," she replied, marveling at how right the words felt on her lips. "My unexpected home." The days that followed were filled with a happiness Abigail had never dared to imagine for herself. She and Adam worked side by side to prepare for the coming spring, planning expansions to the garden and discussing improvements to the cabin. In the evenings, they would sit before the fire, sometimes talking late into the night about their hopes and dreams, sometimes simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. But the shadow of Harold Blackstone still hung over them. 2 weeks after the Jenkins visit, Adam rode to the nearest town for supplies and returned with troubling news. "Blackstone's men have been through asking questions," he told Abigail, his expression grave. "They're working their way through every settlement in the territory." Abigail's hands trembled as she set down the shirt she had been mending. "What are we going to do?" Adam sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "We have 2 choices," he said. "We can pack up and head farther west, maybe to Oregon or California, or we can stand our ground and face him." "Would we ever stop running?" Abigail asked softly. "Would he ever stop looking?" Adam's jaw tightened. "Men like Blackstone don't give up easily," he acknowledged, "which is why I'm inclined to face this head-on." "How?" Abigail asked, fear and determination warring within her. Adam's plan was both simple and audacious. They would travel to Cheyenne together and be married by the justice of the peace, establishing their union legally before Blackstone could interfere. Then, with the support of the law and the community, they would confront Blackstone directly, making it clear that his pursuit of Abigail was both unwelcome and unlawful. "It's risky," Adam admitted, "but I believe it's our best chance for a life free from his shadow." Abigail considered his words carefully. The thought of returning to Cheyenne, of possibly facing Blackstone, filled her with dread. But the alternative, a life spent looking over her shoulder, never knowing when her past might catch up with her, was equally unbearable. "All right," she finally agreed. "We'll go to Cheyenne. Together." The journey to Cheyenne took 3 days. They traveled cautiously, staying alert for any sign of Blackstone or his men. Abigail rode her own horse now, a gentle mare Adam had purchased for her in town, and wore a new dress he had brought back as well, sewn by the storekeeper's wife, according to his somewhat inexpert descriptions. As the familiar skyline of Cheyenne appeared on the horizon, Abigail felt a mix of anxiety and determination. This town had been a place of fear for her, but with Adam beside her, she found the courage to face those fears. They rode directly to the justice of the peace, an elderly man named Judge Wilson who had been serving Cheyenne since its earliest days. After hearing their story, the judge agreed to marry them immediately. The ceremony was brief, but heartfelt. Abigail wore the blue dress Adam had bought her, with wildflowers he had picked along the trail tucked into her hair. As they spoke their vows, Abigail felt a sense of rightness settle over her, as if every step of her journey had been leading to this moment. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Judge Wilson declared with a smile. "May your union be blessed with love and prosperity." Adam's kiss was tender yet possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. When they parted, Abigail saw in his eyes a love so profound it took her breath away. "Mrs. Evans," he murmured, testing the name on his tongue. "Mr. Evans," she replied with a smile that held all the hope in her heart. Their wedding night was spent at the town's respectable hotel. Adam insisted on nothing less for his bride. In the privacy of their room, they discovered each other with wonder and tenderness, their bodies expressing what words could not fully convey. Afterward, as Abigail lay in the circle of Adam's arms, she felt a peace she had never known before. "Tomorrow," Adam said softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, "we face Blackstone. Are you ready?" Abigail nodded against his chest. "With you beside me, I can face anything." The next morning they dressed with care, Adam in his best shirt and vest, Abigail in her blue dress. Hand in hand, they walked to Blackstone's office on the main street of Cheyenne. The clerk at the front desk tried to turn them away, but Adam's quiet insistence, backed by the unmistakable strength in his stance, convinced the man to announce them. Harold Blackstone was a man of medium height with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. He rose from behind his massive desk when they entered, his expression shifting from annoyance to shock and then calculated pleasure when he recognized Abigail. "Miss Reed," he said, ignoring Adam completely. "How kind of you to return. You've led me on quite a chase." "It's Mrs. Evans now," Abigail corrected him, her voice steady despite the fear that still lingered in her heart. "And I didn't return for you. I came to tell you to stop looking for me." Blackstone's smile tightened. "I see," he said, his gaze finally moving to Adam. "And you are?" "Adam Evans," Adam replied, his voice level but with an undercurrent of steel. "Abigail's husband." Blackstone laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "How convenient for her," he remarked, "though I doubt the legality of a marriage conducted while the bride was fleeing a prior commitment." "There was no prior commitment," Abigail stated firmly. "I rejected your proposal, Mr. Blackstone, multiple times." "A temporary setback," Blackstone dismissed with a wave of his hand. "You would have seen reason eventually." Adam's posture stiffened, but his voice remained calm. "Mr. Blackstone, my wife and I have come here today to make one thing clear. Your pursuit of her ends now." Blackstone's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat, Mr. Evans?" "No," Adam replied evenly. "It's a statement of fact. Abigail is my wife now, legally and in the eyes of God. Your claim on her, whatever you imagined it to be, is null and void." "I could ruin you both," Blackstone said softly, the threat clear in his voice. One word from me, and no one in this town would dare employ your wife again. And as for you, Mr. Evans' accidents happen on the frontier all the time." "That sounds very much like a threat," came a new voice from the doorway. All three turned to see Sheriff Thomas Miller standing there, his weathered face set in grim lines. Beside him stood Judge Wilson and several prominent citizens of Cheyenne, whom Abigail recognized from her time teaching. "Judge Wilson informed me of Mrs. Evans' situation," the sheriff continued, stepping into the room. "And these good folks have come to vouch for her character. Seems there's quite a different story about why she left town than the one you've been spreading, Blackstone." Blackstone's face darkened. "This is a private matter, Sheriff. Not when it involves threats and harassment of a citizen of my town, it isn't," Sheriff Miller replied firmly. "Now, I suggest you accept that Miss Reed forgive me. Mrs. Evans has made her choice, and that choice isn't you." One of the citizens, Mrs. Halloway, whose children Abigail had taught, stepped forward. "We want Abigail back as our school teacher," she declared. "The children have missed her terribly. And we want Mr. Blackstone to understand that his money doesn't give him the right to bully decent folks." Blackstone looked from face to face, clearly gauging his options. Finally, his shoulders slumped slightly in defeat. "Fine," he said coldly. "She's not worth the trouble anyway." Adam's hand tightened on Abigail's, but he kept his composure. "I believe we're finished here," he said, turning to lead Abigail toward the door. "One moment," Sheriff Miller interjected. "Mr. Blackstone, I expect those reward notices for Mrs. Evans to be taken down immediately. And if I hear of any retaliation against her or her husband, you and I will have a much less pleasant conversation. Do I make myself clear?" Blackstone's jaw worked as he fought to control his anger, but finally he nodded curtly. "Crystal clear, Sheriff." Outside in the bright spring sunshine, Abigail felt as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "I can't believe it's over," she whispered, leaning against Adam's solid strength. "Believe it," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You're free now, Abigail, we both are, Mrs." Halloway approached them, her kind face wreathed in smiles. "We meant what we said about wanting you back as our teacher, Abigail," she said. "Though I understand if you and your husband have other plans." Adam and Abigail exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. "Thank you, Mrs. Halloway," Abigail said warmly. "But my home is with Adam now on our homestead. Although," Adam added thoughtfully, "we're not so far from town that Abigail couldn't come in once or twice a week to teach, if that would be of interest." Mrs. Halloway beamed. "That would be wonderful. The children would be delighted, and it would give you a chance to stay connected to the community." As they rode out of Cheyenne later that day, Abigail felt a profound sense of peace. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility. She glanced at Adam riding beside her, his profile strong against the blue sky, and her heart swelled with love. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her gaze. "I'm thinking about that night you found me in the snow," she replied. "How you said I'd make it home with you. I didn't understand then what a gift you were offering me." Adam's smile was tender. "The gift was mine, Abigail. You brought life and love back into my world. Our world now," she corrected gently. "Our home." As they crested the rise that would take them back toward their cabin, the setting sun painted the snow-capped mountains with gold and crimson. It was beautiful, this wild country they had claimed as their own. Beautiful and harsh and full of unexpected blessings, like finding love in the midst of a blizzard, when all hope seemed lost. Adam reached across the space between them, taking Abigail's hand in his. "Welcome home, Mrs. Evans," he said softly. Abigail squeezed his hand, her heart full to bursting. "I am home," she replied. "Wherever you are, that's my home now. Together, they rode toward their cabin, toward the future they would build together, a future born in a snowstorm but destined to bloom in the warmth of their love for each other. 5 years later, the Evans homestead had grown considerably. A larger cabin stood beside the original structure, which now served as Adam's workshop. A thriving garden stretched behind the house, and a small orchard of apple trees was beginning to bear fruit. Chickens scratched in the yard, and several horses grazed in the paddock beside the expanded barn. On the porch, Abigail sat in a rocking chair, watching as Adam taught their 4-year-old son, James, to whittle a stick with a small knife. Beside them, 2-year-old Elizabeth toddled after a butterfly, her chubby legs still unsteady but determined. Inside, Abigail knew the cradle Adam had carved months ago stood ready for the new baby they expected before winter. Life was full, sometimes exhausting, often challenging, but always rich with love. Twice a week, Abigail still rode to Cheyenne to teach at the school while Adam minded the children. On other days, she worked alongside him on their homestead, building the life they had dreamed of together. They had heard that Harold Blackstone had eventually left Cheyenne. His business interests sold to a company from back east. The town had flourished without his oppressive presence, and Abigail and Adam had found true acceptance within the community. As the sun began to set, Adam gathered the children and brought them to the porch. James clambered onto Abigail's lap, while Adam settled Elizabeth on his own knee. "Tell the story, Mama," James requested, his blue eyes so like his father's, bright with anticipation. "The one about how Papa found you in the snow." Abigail smiled, meeting Adam's gaze over their children's heads. It was their favorite bedtime story, though simplified for young ears. "Well," she began, her voice soft with remembrance, "once upon a time, a brave cowboy was riding home through a terrible blizzard." As she told the tale, Adam reached over and took her hand, his touch as reassuring and loving as it had been on that fateful day when he had found her half frozen in the snow. In his eyes, she could still see the promise he had made her, then a promise he had kept every day since. "You'll make it home with me," and she had. They both had. Home wasn't just the cabin they had built together or the land they had tamed. Home was the love they had found in each other's arms, a love that had only deepened with the passing years. As twilight settled over the Wyoming landscape, painting the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold, Abigail Evans knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not in a place, but in the heart of the man who had saved her in more ways than one.